All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Tyler Hogan. I'm the CEO of Bright Ideas Press, and we've got a lot to cover today. So we're going to just jump right in and get into it. But let's start with a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time that we get to spend together. Lord, thank you for this ministry that you've given to us to help homeschool families with their curriculum. And Lord, we take that so seriously, and we treasure the opportunity to help families to know you better, to love you more, and to understand this amazing world that you've built around us better. We ask that you would use this time to build us all up and that we would be better equipped to help these families today. Please help me to have useful things to say this next time that we have together, and just be with us, bless our efforts, and help us to love and serve you and our customers better more and more each day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so I've got a little poll going on here just to get a little bit of a feel for um, where you guys are in terms of your current homeschooling situation and homeschooling experience. I'll leave that up for just a minute, and then I've got another poll, and uh, I'll be asking what BIP products you're most familiar with and least familiar with, and maybe that'll help us to tailor the conversation a little bit more. So I want to cover four things today. I want to talk about Bright Ideas' heritage, our heart, and our philosophy of education. We'll talk about our handiwork and do an overview of each of our titles. And then lastly, we'll go over some of our common help desk questions. I also want to let you know that all of these slides and the information that's on them are going to be available to you. I've got some Excel spreadsheets that I put together as handouts, so don't feel like you have to furiously take notes. All of this will be at your disposal in either PDF or Excel format so that you can have them as quick references for later on. So let's start with a little bit about our heritage, our company history. So this picture right here is my parents, Maggie and Bob Hogan. We have been homeschooling since 1991. My older brother was in, I guess it was about third grade, and he was in our local public schools gifted and talented program. And he was miserable there because it wasn't a let's challenge these kids to learn more and grow. It was let's use these kids as tutors for all the other kids who are falling behind. And that was not doing it for JB. By the end of the school year, he hated school, he hated learning, he hated books, he hated everything that had to do with education. And my mom was not okay with that. So she pulled him out to try and reignite his love of learning. And it was just for a year, she said, and not realizing that she would be graduating both of her sons from homeschool within a blink of an eye. But so the next year after we started homeschooling, Mom became the director of our local umbrella group, Family Learning Academy. Not because she had the most experience, but because she was the most willing to help. And she started doing workshops for other new homeschoolers, teaching them everything that she was learning as she went. The first book that she published was called, it was a big seller, it was called The Unofficial Guide to Homeschooling in Delaware, or UGFID, as we refer to it. And I don't have a picture of it because Mom destroyed all photo evidence of the awful graphic design that was that cover. So it was not a highly auspicious start for a publishing company. But she kept doing workshops. She kept speaking to our local homeschool groups, and then she started going to different state conventions up in Pennsylvania and Virginia. We're based in Delaware, so we just started branching out geographically. And she started doing a workshop called Hands-on Geography because she found that a lot of parents just didn't know what to do with their kids for geography. So she started a handout for that, and the handout kind of just grew out of control. And before she knew it, she had a book. So this is the original hands-on geography text before it was revived, or revised, excuse me. And I think it was 2004 or so. So we started just publishing more things that we found were useful to us. You know, this was back in the homeschooling days where there weren't really choices for curriculum. It was, you know, Bob Jones or Abeka, and if you didn't like those, you had to make your own thing. So we did a lot of making our own things, and found that other people liked the things that we made, so we just started sharing them. And we had friends who would come to us with, hey, I've got this thing that I made. Do you think people would like it? So we started publishing more and more little works and helps and guides. And you know, in those days, more people were after, all right, just give me an outline. I can fill in the gaps myself. People weren't as often looking for a full curriculum that was a step-by-step, everything you need to know. Um, so we were publishing guidebooks and outlines and scope and sequence and resource books. And those were going really well. And then in the early 2000s, we met up with Linda Hobar and started publishing The Mystery of History. And that was just enormously well received. So we started doing, history was a big focus. So we had history, we had science, we had geography, and lots of other resources that we were carrying that we found helpful. So we spent the better part of the 90s and 2000s just kind of slowly building our catalog and finding some series and titles that really stuck and resonated with people. And we started filling out those series. So we had The Mystery of History, which is our world history program. We have All American History, which was written by Celeste Rakes. She's actually my music pastor's wife, and she taught me history class from like 3rd grade on, and just a fantastic history program. We added Christian Kids Explore Science, and then the Young Scholars Guide to Composers, and later poetry. I came on board full time for Bright Ideas right after I graduated college, and we started moving more into digital materials. So we published Wonder Maps, which is our electronic atlas, North Star Geography, which is our junior high and high school geography program, and started adding a lot of our supplemental materials for the rest of our titles. We eventually, in, I guess it was the early 2010s, my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and had to pull back quite a bit from her speaking and involvement in the company. She's still involved, she's still on the board, but she wasn't able to continue doing the traveling around to conventions and speaking, you know, every other weekend. That was just a bit too much. So I started taking over for her on that side. And as of this past year, we made a change that we've been talking about for ages and ages, which is to go from a wholesale and resale model to wholesale only. So we finally figured out that people like you guys are way better at serving individual customers than our tiny little family company could ever be. So we're delighted to just be working with resellers and serving you guys better so that you can serve the masses in a way that we never really could. So this is a picture of the Hogan clan. It's a little bit out of date. It's missing, I think, about 4 children. Yeah. So that's me and my wife, Helen, at the top. Helen's also a homeschool graduate. And then those 3 girls on the left are 3 out of our 5. Not pictured as my son and youngest daughter. And then my brother JB is on the right there with his wife Christy. And they've got 3 boys now, not just that one that you can see. And so JB lives here in Delaware as well, and works the business with me. So it's definitely a family affair. We've got some other wonderful people on our team, like Susan, who's with us today. A lot of you have probably already met Susan. She's at gym. So hey, Susan. And so, yeah, as we've just kind of started off from just, all right, what's going to work in our house? Because some of these textbooks just aren't quite doing it for us. It's really just grown as a as a service to other homeschoolers, we try and make things that would work well and serve other people and that we would want to use ourselves. And we're really proud of our product line now. And we've got some exciting plans on how to grow our offerings and improve the items that we have already. But yeah, that's our history in a nutshell. We've got a lot of great stuff on the way, and I hope we'll be able to do more of these webinars and make sure that you're well acquainted with those. So before we go on to the next segment, I'm going to open up another poll, if I can, if it'll let me. Is it going to let me? No, I guess not. Well, so I was going to ask which products you were most familiar with and which ones you wanted to have a little bit of extra focus on, but feel free to just put that in the chat if there's something that you really have a burning question about on our product line. There's also a Q&A feature on this Zoom platform, so if you've got a specific question that you want to make sure gets noticed and not lost in the chat, you can use the Q&A function, and we'll be answering those towards the end. So the next thing I wanted to go over just a little bit was our heart. And by that, I mean kind of our philosophy of education and how we design our products. And the first thing that is just incredibly important to us is our Christian worldview. So all of our products are coming from a decidedly Christian perspective. We have our statement of faith up on the website. If anybody asks, where do we stand on any issues, you can always direct them there. It's kind of a broad evangelical statement of faith. We have we're trying not to get into denominationally specific things in all of our books. We do take a literal 7-day creationist young earth stance in all of our science materials and our history programs. So that is part of where we're coming from. And then we also often get asked in like the Mystery of History Volume 3, which covers the Renaissance and Reformation. A lot of times we'll get questions from Catholic homeschoolers wondering if this is going to be hostile to them. And I usually let them know, hey, we have a theological editor for all of our history works. And he's definitely coming from a Protestant Reformed background. But we also have a copy editor who is Catholic. So she and the two of them together help make sure that everything that we're doing is fair and balanced in those history books. We try really hard not to make heroes out of people who shouldn't be heroes or vilify people who don't need to be vilified. We try and really keep to the facts. So, when we're talking about the Reformation, we'll be very specific about hey, these are the things that the Catholic Church was doing that was very unbiblical, but we'll also spend time talking about their counter-reformation and the ways that they changed outside of the Protestant Reformation. So, but regardless of denomination, having a strong biblical Christian worldview is at the heart of all of our programs. And it's a little, I'm not sure how I feel about it because the biggest growing segment in homeschooling right now is secular homeschoolers. And that makes me glad that they're getting into homeschooling, but sad that they're often missing out on some really good materials. But we've had overtures to make secular versions of a lot of our materials, and we haven't taken people up on that because it's just so important to us that all of our materials are glorifying God and are accurate to history. And we're not trying to be obnoxious and preachy about it, but it's just foundational to who we are, and because of that, it's also pervasive. Another major part of our philosophy of education is that we are parent-driven. So we trust parents. We think parents are smart. We trust them to make good decisions for their kids. And one of the ways that shows up is that we don't offer just one activity for each lesson. We'll usually offer a whole range of, here's a bunch of different things that you can do. And then we trust parents to pick and choose what's going to work well for their family. Sometimes people will look at our textbooks and think, oh, wow, that's a lot of projects and activities. And we always remind them, hey, don't try and do everything in the book. That's like 4 or 5 times more than any one family should ever attempt. That's an easy way to burn out. But we offer a big variety because you know your kids. and you know what's going to fly with them, and you know what your family has time for this week, and you know what their learning styles and modalities are. So pick and choose the things that are going to work for you. It's also very important to us because we love parents that our stuff is practical. We try and keep it as easy to use as humanly possible. We make a big point about having a useful introduction to each of our books that's written to the parents. And honestly, if people would read those introductions, I think a lot of their questions would be answered before they even gave you a call. But we have pretty thorough information in all of our titles on how to use this book, how to set up your schedule, how to set up your notebook, what kind of prep you're going to need to do. We try and keep our preparations minimal as much as possible. We want parents to be able to just open the book and use it. But it, you know, if you're going to be doing hands-on activities, you need to be thinking ahead a little bit just to make sure like you have materials and that sort of thing. We also think it's really important to make it practical for families who have more than one kid, because we find that the vast majority of our families have 3 children on average, often many more, and they're trying to do history with all of them. And if you've got a kindergartner, a 3rd grader, a 6th grader, a 9th grader, and you're trying to do 4 different history curriculums, that's a nightmare. I've seen people who were in that kind of situation and they were doing 4 different periods in history with each child. And that, I don't know how you do that. That's, you'd either have to be super mom or just way in over your head. So we try and make our curriculum have a broad age range that you can use them with, so that families in that situation only have to use one book and they can prepare for everybody at the same time. Another important thing to us is that our curriculum be enjoyable. My mom always used to say, what we perform, we remember, and if it's fun, we're motivated to do it again. So we have a big emphasis on hands-on projects and activities, things that get all of our senses involved and that are delightful for students no matter what their preferred learning modality is, you know, whether you're auditory or visual or read write or kinesthetic. We want to make sure that there's something in there for everybody. So we're very learning style friendly, and we're big on making fun memories that make the learning really stick and give students a good impression of learning, because we believe in building lifelong learners. We believe in fostering a love of learning. And when you have positive learning experiences, that's much more likely to happen. So we try and have fun with everything that we do. Some things are more fun than others, and sometimes that's, you know, subject matter specific, and sometimes that's just a function of personality, but we do our best to keep things enjoyable. Quality is also very important to us. There's kind of a fine line when you're trying to decide as a curriculum developer how much academic rigor you're going to put into a program. We think academic rigor is important, and we try to make sure that our materials are very high quality and have good scholarly depth to them, but we also want to keep things accessible. We want to appeal to the average homeschool family. We want anybody to be able to pick up our books and think, oh, I can use this. This isn't gonna intimidate my kid. There's some great homeschool programs that are out there that are they're just so much, and they're too much for most families. Some families are, you know, they've got highly academically gifted kids and they want that kind of, you know, Ivy League mentality, and that's great for them, but that's not for everybody. So we want to be the kind of place where whether you've got a struggling learner, a on par learner, or someone who's really gifted and wants to go deeper, you can use our materials with any of them. And one of the ways that we do that is by having a really great supplemental book list. And almost every book we've got opportunities for further research, further study, more biographies, more books to read, fiction and nonfiction. So we try and make it so that you can go as deep as you want to go, but you don't feel intimidated or guilty if you're not doing absolutely everything that's on the supplemental list. And then that kind of goes along with the last bit, which is accessibility. So we want our materials to be affordable. We want our materials to be something that the average family can actually buy. So one of the things that we do is we try and limit the materials that are required to use our program. Almost all of our curriculum has a student reader and a companion guide. And the reader has the lesson text, and the companion guide will have all of the activities, the teacher's material, tests and quizzes, appendices, the book lists, games, all the fun stuff that really makes it a curriculum is going to be in that companion guide. And for most of our products, when you buy the reader, you get the companion guide included as a download. So there's a little unique download code in the front of the book that'll let you download from our website the companion guide for that title. And we try and make it so that everything you need to use the curriculum is right there in those two pieces, the reader and companion guide. Now, we do offer a lot of additional supplemental materials, and we think of those as gravy. So some people like a lot of gravy, and so we've got folder books and challenge cards and note-taking pages and coloring pages and audiobooks and ebooks and this, that, and the other thing. But that's all gravy. You don't need it to get a meal out of the curriculum. Some people like it, some people want it, some people are willing to pay more for it, and that's great. But if you don't want it, if you don't need it, if you can't afford it, it's not stopping you from using the program. We don't want to be the curriculum that costs $250 just to get started with it. So I'm going to show in just a second a list of our curriculum and what the materials and age ranges are. But I just wanted to pause here for a second and say, these are the things that have been driving our curriculum development for almost 30 years now. And we're really proud of what we've built, and we think that it has served a lot of families well. But we also are always trying to improve, and we're always looking for feedback on ways to make our stuff better. So as you guys hear from customers, we want to hear that feedback. If there's something that we're doing that we could do better, we want to know about it. So don't hesitate to pass those kinds of comments that you get. Oh man, I really wish they had this, chart. That would just make everything so much easier for me. Well, we're usually happy to make it. We just need to, if we didn't realize that was a need, we wouldn't put it in there. But now that we know, that'll either show up in the errata or in the next printing. So please, as you hear of things that we can do to improve our books, we definitely want to hear that material. All right, so let's move on and talk a little bit about our handiwork. And by that, I mean the various programs that we have available. This first chart, this is part of what's going to be in that Excel sheet that you are all going to have a copy of. This is our product grade ranges. So I mentioned before, we try and make our materials appeal to a very broad range and make it easy to bring older and younger students along if it's targeted more for that middle. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes going through each of these titles and explaining how to use them for their target grades and for their adaptability ranges. So first off, we have the Mystery of History, or MO as we call it around here. MO 1 and 2 are both designed for a target group of about 3rd through 8th grade. So people will use it K through 12, and that's great. But the reading level is really meant for that middle grade. It skews in volumes 1 and 2 a little bit younger. As you go on to volumes 3 and 4, I mean, really each lesson is progressive, or each volume is progressive. The lessons get a little bit longer. The vocabulary gets a little bit older. So something that you would find in MO 1 is going to be considerably easier to pick up and read with a 3rd grader than something you would find in MO 4. So MO 1 and 2 target range is 3rd through 8th grade. MO 3 and 4, you would probably start MO 3 at like 5th or 6th grade and MO 4 at around 6th grade. And both of those go up to high school just on their own. They don't really need supplementation. MO 1 and 2, if you wanted to use them for high school, you can, but you would either need to supplement using the resources provided in the book list. There's a great book list in MO. It's broken down lesson by lesson with books and movies and websites and all kinds of cool resources. And they're also broken down by by age range for each lesson. So you get a good feel for, okay, this is a high school level resource that we can use. So you can either supplement each of those volumes, or if you wanted, you could combine volumes 1 and 2 into a single year. And if you do that, then you're doubling up the reading. But again, the lessons are shorter, so for a high schooler, that's not going to be too terribly challenging. And you'll cut the homework and activities in half so that you can get through it in a year. For younger students, you can bring them along for the ride, or you can spend more time on each lesson. So we started Mystery of History Volume 1 when my oldest was in about first grade. And we've spent 2 years on each volume because we've got 5 kids and we're not ready to really pick up the pace, so that we want the younger ones to be able to keep up. So volumes 1 and 2, we're doing it at half pace and having a great time with it. Mo 3 and 4, you not only do the lessons get a little bit more advanced with their reading level, but also with the subject matter. So in Mo 3, you're in the Renaissance, and you've got some of those crazy Italian artists with their unusual lifestyles and moral choices. So if you have a younger student that you're doing Mo 3 with, there's some material that you might want to preview or skip over. And we make a point in starting with that title of, if there's anything that might be awkward or uncomfortable, to put a parental notice at the beginning of the lesson, and then also at the beginning of the passage that covers whatever the uncomfortable topic might be. So you'll get a notice that says, hey, just so you know, coming up in this lesson is the part that you might need to skip for younger readers. And then when you get to that material, it'll say, all right, this part of the lesson starts here, and it's in bold, so you can't really miss it. And then later on, it'll say, all right, you can resume reading here. So we try and make it easy for parents if they've got younger ears that they don't want to have listened to everything that went on in the Renaissance, that's easy to adapt. Mo 4, we do the same thing, but it's more of some of the lessons because it's tricky stuff. Like it's the Holocaust and the Cold War and communist revolutions and atrocities. Like that's a lot of that period of modern history. And we're not going to not cover it, but if you've got really little ones, they might not be ready for it. So you can use it for those younger ones, bring them along if you've got older kids, but you might need to adjust the material to suit what they're ready for. All American History is obviously it's our American History program. It's a bit different in its setup. It starts at about 5th grade for volume 1 or 6th grade for volume 2. It's very easy to use in high school all by itself. If you are needing to do just 1 year of American history in high school, and we found a lot of families want to do just 1 year of American history, you can easily combine volumes 1 and 2 into a single year. You double up the reading and you cut the assignments in half. So that it's a pretty simple formula. And some of the units you can probably go even faster with. Like if you find that the units covering certain wars is just too much military history, or the explorers is too much explorers, then you can speed through those even faster if you wanted to. Now, there's also a product called Junior, which was designed to help bring younger students along. It's only available as a digital product, and I don't think there's any way to get a hold of it right now, but it is mentioned in the teacher's guide. So if you get questions about Junior, it's not currently available, but we're planning in future printings to include the best Junior material into the companion guide. So if you buy the book, you'll also have that younger student, basically a younger student companion guide. You can have younger students tag along. My older brother was 5 years older than me, so I did a lot of my homeschooling just as a tag along and learning by osmosis, and I think that's a great method. So the tag-alongs are great. You just kind of lower your expectations and do what you can to assess how much they're learning. But Junior was designed and mentioned in the teacher's guide, so that's why I make a point about that.
Tyler?
Yes, Susan.
Sarah has a customer with a question. trying to discern the difference between older and newer ah. So they may actually be confused with mo, but somehow they may have found an ah that they think is a new addition or an old addition. So we wanted to address this question for Sarah's customer.
Okay, I'm actually, in just a minute, I'm going to be going title by title and talking a little bit more about how to use the books and the schedules and the formats that they're in. So I will make sure and address that when we get to that section, if that's okay.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the Christian Kids Explore Science series. There's 5 titles here. Biology and Earth and Space are designed for younger students, so 3rd through 5th grade. Chemistry and physics are older, so 6th through 8th grade. And creation science is kind of an odd one. It's like 5th grade through 8th grade, but there's a pretty big divide in the 1st and 2nd semester. So the 1st semester, they cover simpler scientific ideas with regards to creation science, and the 2nd semester gets into much more complicated ideas. So the 1st semester, you could do that maybe even as young as 3rd grade, but I would feel more comfortable doing the 2nd semester starting at 5th or 6th grade. Biology and Earth and Space, they're easy enough to supplement for 6th through 8th grade, or you can combine them and do them as a semester apiece instead of as a full year program each. And they're also easy for younger students to tag along with them because they've got, you know, the fun, simple science experiments, and they're very easy to use and easy to bring younger kids along with. Chemistry and physics, because they're geared a little bit older and they've got some more complicated science concepts, you know, you're dealing with a lot of forces and different kinds of molecules in chemistry, and so it would be a little harder for younger students to tag along, but it is possible. And then we do not recommend any of these books for high school. We've had people use chemistry and physics in high school if they needed to cover the material and those particular concepts in the scope and sequence without having the math background. So we've had some people who had, you know, a student who really struggled with math, and that's what they used to introduce them to the science of it. But we don't recommend that broadly. There's a lot of other great science materials out there for high school, and we're not trying to compete with those at this time. So let's see, next up is the Young Scholars Guide series. Those were written kind of like Mr. History for about 3rd through 8th grade. If you wanted to use them for high school, you would need to do some supplementing for them. Neither of them have a lot of output required in terms of like writing. So in the poetry book, there's 3 lessons that would have you, you know, try your hand at writing your own poem. It's not like a full English credit. So you could use it as part of an English credit, but not all by itself. And same with composers. It's great for music appreciation and music history, but it's not a full credit in either of them. If you wanted to get a full music credit, you know, combine that with piano lessons or music theory or something else like that. North Star Geography was written for high schoolers, younger students like junior high, 7th and 8th grade. They could probably do it pretty easily, especially if they take it at a little bit of a slower pace. Some people follow the 2-year schedule with that program rather than doing all of it in 1 year. And I think that's totally fine. You just want to be careful which activities you're picking and choosing, because some of them, like the memorization list, you're going to have a harder time memorizing all of the countries in the world if you're only doing geography once every 2 weeks or so. Like that would be a hard way to do a lot of memorization. Wonder Maps is good for all ages. It's not a curriculum, it's an atlas that has just a huge library of both modern reference maps and historical and thematic maps. And we find that that's useful for every subject, every grade level, and even for adults just wanting to use maps for all kinds of stuff. We've got people who will use their maps in Sunday school classes and other settings, and I think that's great. Oh, I forgot to put Civitas on this list. I'll do that later and update it before I send the Excel sheet to you. Civitas, the age on the box is ages 10 and up. If you're wanting to use the lesson plans that go along with it and do a study of world geography forms, you're really looking at junior high or high school level. But as far as being able to play the game and understanding the mechanics, 10 and up is fine. And then lastly, demystifying learning styles. That is not a curriculum piece. That is a source book for parents, kind of a user manual, how to understand your kids' learning styles and make the most of them. So that's our age ranges. Next, I've got another lovely spreadsheet for you. These are all of our programs and what all of the different formats they're in, and what the supplements available for them are. So hopefully Janice will be able to answer your question a little bit here. So starting with Mystery of History, volumes 1, 3, and 4 are all in this lovely hardback format. It's beautiful full color illustrations, nice, great reader, and then inside is your download code to get a digital copy of the companion guide. So that comes as a PDF, and that's included with your purchase of the reader. Volume 2 is a little bit different just because it's older. We're working on a second edition, but this is volume 2. As you can see, it's paperback, it's black and white, and it's thick because this has both the lesson text and the companion guide material all in one book. So volume 2 is getting a update and facelift in the second edition, and it'll be just like the rest of its siblings, hopefully by next season, next selling season. But for now, it's kind of the oddball out, which is so sad. We're working really hard on getting second edition out. So 1, 3, and 4 have the reader and a digital companion guide that's included. Volume 2 has a physical companion guide that's included, and there's also a digital copy that you can get to print if you need that. I see a question. No, it will not be ready fall of this year. I'm so sorry. I really wish it were. It's a massive project to put out a new edition of a book like this. So we're planning. I hate saying this on video. I might pause the recording, but we're hoping to have it for early spring of 21. So it'll be ready for people making purchases in the spring or summer. Other materials for Mystery of History, the only other thing that you need to do everything in the book is a good historical atlas. And for that, we have wonder maps, or you can get something like the Rand McNally Historical Atlas of the World. Those are both great choices. Mystery of History Volume 1, since it's dealing with ancient civilizations and the Bible, you also need a good Bible atlas. And again, Wonder Maps has you covered, or you can get something like the Student Bible Atlas or any number of other good Bible atlases. And those are only required if you're doing the geography. I think geography adds a lot to the program, but I'm also really biased because I'm an absolute geography nerd. So you can do the program without doing the geography parts and not need anything else, but I recommend it personally. Next is the supplemental collection. Those include 4 pieces. So that has coloring pages, it has note-taking pages, it has challenge cards, and it has folder books. The folder books are like lap books, if you're familiar with those. So they've got one for each quarter, and they're a lot of fun. They're good multimodal learning activities, good for review. The note-taking pages come in 5 different variations, and you get all of them when you buy the supplement. So they have a blank page that you can either draw on or write freehand. There's a fillable PDF if you want to type on it. There's one with write-on lines that are wide spaced for younger students and one with narrower spaces for older students. And then there's a kind of a review sheet that asks some questions and gives them some more direction on what to fill out on these note-taking pages. And then the challenge cards they're like little index cards, and it's almost like a little catechism. You've got the question on one side and then the question and answer on the other. And all of these supplements are digital only. So we don't really sell physical copies of these, but we have them on CD, and you can print out whatever pieces you want. Because if you're not using all of it, that would be a waste of a lot of paper to try and buy it all in a physical format. And you can take them to a printer, and if people get complaints at Staples or Office Max or wherever they go, we have a form letter that we send to those companies saying yes, they're authorized to do these printings. So if anybody has trouble with that, you can send them our way, and we're happy to help them out. The other supplement that's unique to Volume 2 is there is a cookbook for Volume 2, which is a lot of fun. It's got great photography, fun recipes, well-researched. It's a neat cookbook. I like it a lot. And then let's see, we've also got ebooks and audiobooks. The audiobooks are read by the author, and they're actually published by Linda Hobart, not by Bright Ideas Press. So I think you guys carry them directly from her. There are some authors who just shouldn't do readings of their own work, but Linda is not one of them. She's got a great voice, and she knows her materials so well. The ebooks are first edition of Volume 2, so the current one that's out, not the new one that's coming out, is available on Kindle. And the second edition of Volume 1, which is not the shiny new one, it's more like this. So you have probably seen it. Both of those are available on Kindle, and I don't know that they're going to be available on the Kindle store for very much longer, because the Kindle store is a nightmare for this kind of a book. One of our goals coming up is to make shiny new ebook editions of all 4 volumes. And when you guys are all set up to carry our digital products, we can talk more about those later. All right, so that's Mo. All American History, it used to come in 3 pieces. So there was the student reader, which was just the lesson text. And then you had a student activity book. And these were all of the pages that the student would need to fill out. So you've got, I don't know if you can see it real well on the camera, but you've got their reviews, their note-taking, their map work, all that kind of stuff that they would need to put pencil to paper is in the student activity book. Now, in the more recent printings, we've moved to have this as a digital product that's included in the reader with a download code. So this is now called the companion guide, and it's included, just like in Mystery of History, it's included when you buy the reader. But if you have people asking for paperback copies, we used to have them, but they are out of print and have been replaced with the digital companion guide. So they can just print out the pages that they need at home. Now there's a third piece that's really important, and that's the teacher's guide. This has your answer key. This is really the heart of the curriculum. It's got all the games, the fun review projects, the hands-on activities, the supplemental book list, I think I mentioned the answer key, that's always important, including answers for like the research questions. So if you don't have time to do all of the research questions yourself, there's an answer key for those. And that's all in the teacher's guide. We're planning on phasing this out, and hopefully hopefully by the end of the year, maybe a little bit longer than that, this will be included in the digital companion guide that comes with the reader. So instead of having to get 2 pieces, it'll all just be in one. We're trying to simplify and streamline things, because the more complicated this chart is, the harder it is to explain to people, and we want to try and simplify it. And it makes it easier for people to understand it, and makes it easier for us to sell things.
Tyler,
Yes.
could I add a little caveat?
Please.
Your brain is already moving forward with what you have signed off on, so that you're letting them know that the contents of the student activity book are already in the student reader. That will happen as we print this next round of.
Oh, you're so right.
So the next set that you get into your warehouse, that will be true.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I guess I'm already living in May. So right now there are still 3 pieces. There are still student activity books floating out there, and you need all 3 in order to use the program to its greatest potential. But coming soon, the student activity book will be the companion guide, and then eventually the teacher's guide will also be part of that. Thank you, I appreciate that. 2 other optional bits. There's a separate high school test packet, We got requests from some families for more tests for, I guess they needed extra documentation for their state requirements. Um, I don't know. I've never really gotten requests for more testing, but so we made an extra set of high school tests for them. And those are going to be eventually included in that companion guide as well. And then for audiobooks, there is a LibriVox audiobook, and I don't know if you're familiar with LibriVox, but it's designed to provide educational audiobooks specifically for students who have a documented visual disability. So if you are blind, you can get free LibriVox recordings of your educational materials. If you don't qualify, you can't get it at all. So we like having audiobooks available for people, and we try, if we get a special request, hey, I need a Word file of this book so I can transcribe it into Braille for my son. We're all over that. So we love doing that sort of thing. If people ask for an audiobook because of that, point them to LibriVox. Otherwise, there's nothing available right now. Let's see. Did I answer your question, Janice, about All-American History? There are 2 volumes of All-American History. Volume 1 covers the explorers up through right before the Civil War, and Volume 2 picks up at the Civil War and goes up through modern days. If you got any more questions, feel free to post them in chat. Next up, we have CKE, the Christian Kids Explorer Science Series. All of them have the same format. Super easy. You have a paperback book, and then included is a digital download that has the companion guide. And the companion guide is much simpler in these. These are really just reproducible pages. So anything that you would write on in the book, you can print out instead. They've also got some consolidated materials lists and some scheduling helps. So lesson plans, day by day, if you need to be told, all right, open to this page, do this activity, that kind of stuff is in there. So, and that's true of each volume right now. Young Scholars Guide, both composers and poetry. They're more like the Mystery of History. You've got a lovely hardback reader and then download codes on the inside for the companion guide. The readers for those 2 are particularly nice. Like they would make good coffee table books if you wanted to. And then the real curriculum meat is in the companion guide. You can also get both the science books and the Young Scholars Guide books available as ebooks. So they're in PDF format. And those are, if you get the PDF format, you also get a digital download of the companion guide too. So that's, you don't need to buy that separately. Next up is North Star Geography. And this title, you've got a reader, and then if you have an older copy, there's a spot for a CD right here. The newer copies now have a download code instead. And the download code or the CD, whichever copy you have, has so much material, and it's all broken down by type, and we'll get into that a little bit more detail later. But they also have a ebook copy of the textbook. So whether you get a digital version or a physical version, you also get an ebook of the reader, which is nice. There's an audiobook available as well, read by yours truly. And for other optional, I recommend Wonder Maps to go with it. North Star has all the maps that you need, but Wonder Maps has all the maps that you want. So it's really a great supplement for North Star. Next, we have Wonder Maps is only available digitally. There's not a physical copy of it because it's got so many cool features that only make sense on a computer. And then I didn't put on here, but Civitas is only a physical thing until I figure out how to make an app for it or something like that. And Demystifying Learning Styles is available both in paperback and as an ebook. So, this is kind of a whirlwind of charts right now, but let's take a little bit of a closer look into the Mystery of History. So Mystery of History has 4 volumes. The first is Ancient Civilizations and the Bible, so Creation to Resurrection. Volume 2 is Early Church and Middle Ages. Volume 3 covers the Renaissance and Reformation. And Volume 4 goes from the 1700s up to modern day. Well, the last lesson is on the Book of Revelation and the hope of mankind. So I guess it goes past modern history, but technicalities. The way we recommend using Mystery of History is pretty simple. So you have Monday, take the pre-test, which would be in the companion guide. And the pre-test is just a real quick, like 10 questions about the material we're about to study. It's not designed for grading. It's just to give you an idea of what your kids are already familiar with. They can do it written, or you can give it to them verbally. Doesn't matter. It's a real low-key thing, but it's helpful for teachers. Then you'll read a lesson and do an activity. There's 3 lessons in each week, and those are, like I said in the beginning, they're pretty short. In the 4th volume, they get a little bit longer. And there's activities for every single lesson. And most of the time, there's like 2 or 3 or 4 activities for each lesson. And they're broken down by age group into younger, middle, and older students. Again, this is where we give you way more than any one family should ever do. So look through and pick 1 or maybe 2 activities to do in a week. Oh yes, these charts are going to be available. These sample schedules, they'll be available for you as well. So 1, maybe 2 activities is all you need to do. So you'll do lessons and activities Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. There's memory cards that you can make on Wednesday, and they're just a little review system that she teaches you how to make with index cards. Or if you're using the challenge cards, you can use those instead. Thursday is a review day, so you do your timeline, usually adding 3 new figures, 1 for each lesson. And she gives instructions on how to make a timeline. But if you've got another timeline method that you prefer, it's super flexible. And then mapping. Every week has a little bit of mapping. It's not hard. If it's something more complicated, it'll tell you this is really designed for older students. For younger students, often all you really need to do is take out your atlas and trace the route that Nehemiah took with your finger from Persia up to Jerusalem. And just seeing that and having that visual frame of reference is really helpful. Older students would actually be taking an outline map and labeling the important countries and cities and drawing the routes themselves based on their research. And then every other week we'll have an exercise, and every other week we'll have a quiz. So they alternate back and forth. The exercises are usually like a word search or a crossword puzzle or something like that. And the quizzes are usually like 10 to 15 questions. They are cumulative, so they stretch back to your very first lesson. So that helps keep it to be a useful review as you're going all the way back and not just asking, the short-term memory, what did you know about what we talked about the last couple of days? This will stretch back and have them have to keep their minds fresh on all of the material. And then Friday, you can either have as a day off, as a catch-up day, or if you want to bring in some of the supplemental materials like the folder books or the coloring pages or challenge cards, that would be a good time for that. There are quarterly worksheets. There's a midterm test and a final exam test. Well, really, they're more like semester reviews, each of those. Older students, that's important because you'll want to have that documented for grading. Younger students, either skip those kinds of things altogether because, really, does your 2nd grader need testing like that? Or you can do it orally as a review. My kids love those quarterly review days because they get marshmallows and chocolate chips when they get an answer right, or they'll compete against me and see if they can beat Daddy's knowledge of history. So that's fun. You turn into a competition for younger students. Any questions on the Mystery of History? If you do, pop them into chat and I'll make sure to come back to that. All American History, we talked a lot about this already. Volumes 1 and 2. First volume is Explorers to the early 1800s. Volume 2, Civil War to modern day. The schedule for this looks like reading a single lesson. Mo has 3 lessons a week. Ah has 1 lesson for the whole week. So you'd read that whole thing on Monday. And if you want to do your note-taking page as you're reading, that's a good use of time and helps build note-taking skills for kids. Or you can do that on Tuesday, filling in your note-taking pages and answering your for further study questions. The for further study questions are basically little research prompts. So you'll need to give them access to books or some online resources to answer them. Or if you don't have time to do them, the answer keys are in the teacher's guide, and they can just read the answers there. So at least they're getting the material if they don't have time to do the research that particular week. On Wednesday, there's a review sheet for the lesson that they can do. Thursday, you can do more for further study or do activities and review games from the teacher's guide. And Friday, there's some research projects that they can focus on if they're in high school. And there's also a high school test every 4 lessons or so. So again, there's plenty of material in there, and you just pick and choose what's going to be useful and helpful for you. North Star Geography is a little bit of a different schedule because it's got 16 lessons instead of the normal 32 lessons for a full year. But these lessons are designed to be done over 2 weeks. So the first week you would read the lesson on Monday, and then the rest of the 2 weeks are filled with different kinds of activities. If you're not doing all of these activities, you could do it even in a semester if you wanted to cut out some of these components. Atlas building is really fun. You take a blank outline map of a specified area, and then the book will give you a list of all of the things that you need to label on that outline map. So label these countries, these capital cities, these other major cities, important physical features like rivers and mountains and bodies of water, capes and peninsulas, and then any other kind of just important geographic regions. So as they go through, they'll be building an atlas of the entire world that has just a wonderful variety of places labeled so that they've become at least a little bit familiar with where all of these major features are. Wednesday, there's research questions for them to look into. Thursday, we have fact files, and that's just a little graphic organizer. There's one for continents, and then there's another one for countries. So you pick a country in the area that you're studying that week, and you go and fill out the fact file. You fill out the graphic organizer. So there's a little bit of research that you need to do, but a good atlas and almanac, or like the CIA World Fact Book online, you can find everything you need to with resources like that. So that's Thursday. Friday is memorization. So we have a system set up where you memorize every country in the world over the course of the year, as well as 50 of the most important major physical features and landmarks on the globe. So each week or each lesson, they're taking another chunk of the world and memorizing these important places. The second week, so the following Monday, you're doing note-taking and vocabulary. So you might review the lesson with your note-taking page in hand and filling that out. You can do that as you go through the lesson if you want, another good way to build note-taking skills. But if you do it this way, it functions as a good review because you have to get your head back into the text a little bit. And then vocabulary, there's a glossary building assignment because geography has so much great vocabulary. So if you're doing that, that would be a good time for it. And then Tuesday through Thursday, you're doing fun hands-on activities, and there's some great projects in North Star. Again, I'm totally biased. North Star and Wonder Maps are my babies, so I really like them a lot. But I think they're a lot of fun. They're stuff I enjoyed doing. And then Friday is your quiz. So the quiz covers your note-taking page, and it's 10 questions from the lesson, and your memorization list. If you're not doing the memorization list, then you can cut that out of the quiz, and grading is super easy to do without the memorization segment. So that's North Star. Next up, Christian Kids Explore Science. This is set up as kind of a 2-day-a-week system. So Monday, you're going to be reading your lesson, doing the review questions, vocabulary and memory work, and then there's a great recommended reading list that you can pull from. And then Wednesday, you can do more reading, go back over your memory work, and then most importantly is the hands-on project. Every lesson, the lessons are fairly short, and then there's a hands-on project for every single lesson. And we've worked really hard to keep it so that the materials are easy to come by. There's not, expensive lab kits that you need to do anything here. Everything, with the exception of one lesson in the biology book, everything that you need you either have lying around your house or can get it from Walmart. The one exception is in biology. There's an activity where you dissect an owl pellet, but you can get those online. But that's the only thing that you wouldn't be able to find at Walmart. Everything else is real easy to come by. Next up, the Young Scholar's Guide to Composers and to Poetry. So these two books they're not as well known as some of our other titles, but I really wish they were because they're just super cool. The Composer's book is a great introduction to music history. And all of the lessons, there's 32 lessons, 5 of them are, they're overviews of a particular era. So like you might have a lesson on the Baroque period or the classical period or the Romantic period. And the rest of them are biographies of composers who lived within those periods. So the period lessons are kind of a unit heading, and then you've got a bunch of composers that lived and wrote within those periods that you study individually. So on Monday, you would read the lesson, you would listen to the recordings that go along with that particular composer. And we've got a great listening list in there, as well as, since the companion guide is digital, it's got links to YouTube videos. We've got a playlist on our YouTube channel that has all of those great listening suggestions. I think there's also a user-made Spotify playlist that you could subscribe to. And we worked really hard to curate those listening suggestions because sometimes you're trying to just listen to a nice opera and then some scantily clad performer comes on and you're like, oh man, that's not what I wanted my 4th grader to see. So we tried really hard to make sure that all of the costuming and portrayals are going to be appropriate. So it's a well curated list. And it's the nature of those kinds of links is sometimes they go dead and people take down YouTube videos, but we've made it clear enough how to find the pieces so that if you need to search for something yourself and preview it, you can. So Monday, you read the lesson, you listen to those recordings, and then there's a note-taking page or a student review page for them. Wednesday is a little bit lighter. You re-listen to those particular compositions, and there's usually some discussion questions that go with the listening to help kids really dig into them and analyze and think about the instruments that are being used or what emotion or imagery is the composer trying to evoke here. So there's good questions that go with them. And then there's a composer card, which is just a simple little graphic organizer that you can fill out pretty much just using the lesson text. So that's a nice review. And then there's a simple timeline assignment and a simple mapping exercise for each composer. And then lastly, Friday is just another listening day. So you do a lot of listening in this program, which is great because the discipline of sitting down and listening is something that tends to get lost in the shuffle and the hustle and bustle. So I like that this forces you to just sit down, close your eyes if you need to, and pay attention to some music, and it's great stuff. Poetry is set up similarly. The poetry book is a mixture of biographies of poets and discussions on particular poetic genres or poetic devices or poetic forms. I really like the material that's in here a lot. So Monday you would read the lesson, and most of them are set up. There's a few unit heading and unit wrap-up lessons, but most of them have a part A, which is a biography, and a part B, which is a device that poet was particularly well known for. So you might have lesson 16A is Edgar Allan Poe, and you read the bells, and then lesson B is on onomatopoeia or rhyme scheme or any number of other particular devices that poet was well known for, and that poem is a good example of. So the 3 units are poetic forms, so talking about like what's the difference between a couplet and a sonnet and a haiku. Unit 2 is on poetic genres, so What's the difference between a ballad or an ode and a pastoral, or free verse and blank verse, and what's up with E. E. Cummings and that sort of thing. And then Unit 3 is on poetic devices like consonants and assonance, imagery. Uh, there's a bunch of different terms that you would be familiar with either through poetry or literature studies, and those are all part of Unit 3. Each unit has a unit wrap-up and also a poet craft lesson. So it talks to the students about, all right, now that we've studied this, let's try our hand at writing something. We try not to go overboard with that because some students just are not ever going to want to write poetry, but they can still learn to appreciate it. So we've kept the poetry writing to a minimum. You can take it much further if you want to, but we only ask them to try and write a poem on 3 of the lessons. So Monday, read the lesson, read the suggested poems, and do the student review questions. Wednesday, reread the poems. There's a poet info card, just like the composer card, and a simple timeline and simple mapping exercise. Friday, you reread the poems, and then older students can do the poetry journal, and younger students, there's a poetry graphic organizer that they can use instead. So that's Young Scholars Guides. Next up, we have Wonder Maps. And Wonder Maps is software. It's not a book, like some people sometimes seem to think it is. The way it works is you've got just a huge library of maps at your disposal. So there's over 60 maps of the world, different countries and regions, 75 maps of the world, countries and regions, over 60 maps of the United States, each state and state regions. And then there's like 130 some plus historical maps stretching from early biblical history up through modern days. And there's a number of good thematic maps in there as well. There's like 30 some maps that are specifically biblical maps. And if we have time later, I might pull up the interface and show you how to navigate it. But you can find maps either by region or by going through the timeline, because they're also arranged chronologically if you want history maps. The coolest thing about Wonder Maps are the layers. So you can see on this screen where it says pick your features, and there's a list of layers and a little eyeball icon next to them. You can take one map and make dozens of different kinds of maps out of it. So if you have a map of the world and you say, all right, this is great, but I really need this not to have any labels on it, you can turn off all of the country names or all of the city names or all of the physical feature names. They're all on separate layers that you can click on and off individually. There's also layers for things like lines of latitude and longitude. There's color topography or black and white topography if you don't want to do a color printout. So you can take a very full, beautiful, rich, detailed reference map and take it all the way down to a very bare bones outline map or any variation thereof. So that makes it useful for all kinds of applications: geography, history, science, literature, art. Like I give a whole workshop on just how to use maps in everything. So if my personal passion is showing, it's because I love Wonder Maps, and it's such a neat thing. It's the tool that I wanted to have, and that's why we published it. There's a lot of other mapping software out there, and I've used quite a bit of it. Some of it's quite good, but if you want to have a place for all of your maps that you would need for homeschooling in one spot that's easy to use, Wonder Maps is the best solution out there. These layers also extend to the historical maps. So if you have, a map of the Greco-Persian Wars, you're going to have layers for the historical sites, for the troop movements, for Greek victories and Persian victories, and the labels will also be on a separate layer. So you can turn all of those things on and off individually and give your student a blank outline map to fill out completely by themselves using their reference tools. Or you can give them, hey, here's all of the battle sites. I want you to name them, and use it as a quiz or a review that way. So there's so much flexibility in how you can use these maps. I'm very, very fond of it. There's also, this is one of the features that not many people know about in Wonder Maps, all of the maps from all 4 volumes of Mystery of History and both volumes of All American History are included in here. So if you have Mo and you want to print out a map, it's in Wonder Maps. There's also something called a map guide, which will tell you for each lesson in both of these series and all of the books in them, each lesson, here are all the maps that might be a useful visual aid as you're going through the lesson. And you see the lesson title and you click on the maps and you print them out, and it's so simple. All you need to use Wonder Maps is a laptop or a desktop computer. It's not a mobile app. You have to have a computer with Adobe Reader on it, and we'll talk more about technical requirements in a little bit. All right, moving on, there's Civitas. I don't know how many of you have played Civitas. It's pretty new. Civitas is the government card game, and it was born at about the same time North Star Geography was born. When I was running my test pilot group through North Star, we needed a fun game to do with the lesson on governments. And so what we did was we took Uno and we said, all right, each color in Uno is going to be a different form of government. Blue is democracy, yellow is monarchy, green will be a theocracy, and red, of course, is communism. And the way this works is that depending on what form of government is in play, that will determine how we resolve cards like a draw 2. So draw 2 became the tax card. And if you play a draw 2 on me, in Uno, I would just have to draw 2, and that's the end of it. But if it's Civitas, we're in a democracy because it's blue, that's the color in play, then everybody votes on whether or not I have to draw 2. But if we're in a monarchy, if it's yellow, then whoever has the Royal Highness card just decides if I draw 2. If it's a theocracy, then whoever has the Chief Cleric card will search the deck and figure out whether or not I should draw 2 by referencing his chart, like searching the scriptures. And then if it's a communism, of course, everyone draws 2. So this is a great way to get kids to hate communism early and quickly, because everybody hates drawing 2 all the time just because their neighbor had to. And in Civitas, we took this concept and we ran much further with it. Civitas has 8 different government types. It has the 4 I mentioned, as well as a military dictatorship, a republic, a plutocracy, and a anarchy card, which is a lot of fun. So these different government types all have different mechanics to them. And you can pick and choose which ones you want to have in play at any given time. They're like separate decks. So you can just have the monarchy, the democracy, and the republic deck in, or you can play with all 8 if you really want to. Sorry about that. It's a danger of having the home network connected printer in your office. All right, so Civitas, like I said before, it's good for ages 10 and up, but if you want to do some cool government study, there's lesson plans on our website that you can download for free, and those are great for junior high and high school. And it's got a glossary for all kinds of terms that may or may not be easy for a particular parent to define, like, all right, somebody played the Banana Republic card in the military government. How do I explain to my 12-year-old what a Banana Republic is? Well, the glossary will help you with that and give you examples from history or modern periods, what these different cards do and mean. So there's some great event cards, there's fun art, and it's a lot of fun to play. If you can play Uno, you can learn how to play Civitas, and it's not much more complicated. But there's so many great discussions that happen as a result of this game. All right, we're winding down the list of handiwork here. Demystifying Learning Styles is our newest title. This is, it's a short, small book. Yeah, I got a copy right here. It's not a long, difficult read. It's very accessible, And it's just a manual on learning style theories and how to use them in your homeschool. So we talk about a number of the different major models. So we talk about modalities and how they impact motivation. We talk about cognitive science and how memories are formed. We talk about concentration and what impacts concentration, how to help kids concentrate, environmental factors in concentration. We talk about multiple intelligence theories, growth mindset, how to choose good curriculum and set goals in your homeschool. There's a lot of information in there, but it's a very easy to pick up and to apply quickly. So I really like this book a lot. Again, it's got my name on it, so I'm biased, totally biased, but I think it's super duper helpful. It started out of a series of workshops, well, a workshop on learning styles that I started giving a few years back, and they were always very well attended. People really wanted to know, because learning styles are confusing and there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And a lot of it is just not supported by the science. So we tried to do a lot of myth busting in this book, and focus on the things that were actually had credible science behind it, because there's some not so good and a lot of just outdated materials on learning styles that are out there too. So we tried to get everyone up to speed, up to date, and just the facts. All right, now we're closing in on the home stretch here. Our help desk, these are some of the frequently asked questions that we get as we try and help families get their stuff to work. I don't know how you guys personally feel about technology. Some people have an adversarial relationship with it. Some people are power users. We've tried to make all of our software as easy as humanly possible. That said, there's no accounting for human errors, and we've tried to make things as foolproof as possible, but there's, it's computers. There's only so much you can do. So when people, I'm actually going to go out of order on these slides a little bit. These are the major questions that we get about PDF files, about download codes, about zipped files, about device compatibility, and about co-op and classroom licenses. And I have another lovely chart here, and this will be included in your packet. These are frequently asked questions. So the first and most important question that we always ask is, are you using Adobe Reader? Because 98% of the time, people's problems with our digital products are not using Adobe Reader. They're using Preview if they're on a Mac, or Edge if they're on a PC, or they're trying to open the PDF in their browser, their web browser, and that's just not going to cut it. So if people are saying, hey, I can't print this, or the file is asking for a password, or the buttons aren't clickable, or I can only see 4 pages and it's missing all of the material that I thought I was buying, or I can't find these fancy Wonder Maps layers that people are talking about, all of those are caused by not using Adobe Reader. So we just remind people, all right, you can go download Adobe Reader, it's free, install it. When it asks if it can be the default program, you say yes, because it is the best of all possible PDF readers. And then you just try opening the file again using Adobe Reader, and 99.99999% of the time, that solves the problem. The second set of problems that we hear about are with the download codes. So when you buy any of our readers, you get these lovely download codes, but if you have trouble downloading, then you're kind of stuck. So there's 3 common errors. One is the download page will say invalid code. The problem is that they didn't type in the code correctly. So you just have them retype the code, and sometimes people will put like PC or Mac in the code because it's in the book. If you have a PC, use this code. If you have a Mac, use this code. PC and Mac are not part of the code. We try and be clear about these things, but sometimes it doesn't work. So just have them type the code more carefully. There's a very slim chance that they have a bad code. If that's the case, what you can do, we're giving you guys a sheet of spare codes that we keep. So you can hand out these codes for all of our titles and help them just by having a new code to type in. So Just make sure that you keep track of these codes, and if you use one, make a note of it so that you don't give the same code to 2 different customers. The second error message is the code is expired. And what that means is that the book is old. And our codes do actually have an expiration date. Usually it's about 2 or 3 years, sometimes a little bit longer. We usually do reprints of our titles about every 2 years. So if it's a title that gets frequent updates, 2 or 3 years is pretty standard. If it's a title that gets updates less frequently, codes will have a longer expiration date. So if the book is just old and the code says expired, you can give them a spare. The other problem that people will see is limit reached. And there's 2 problems that this might reflect. One is that they bought the book used and the previous family used the code and downloaded the companion guide. And if that's the case, then they need to buy a new companion guide code from someone who sells our digital products. All of our companion guides are available for purchase separately just for this kind of situation. So it's the reason for this is if you want to resell any of our books, you're welcome to do that. But the download code is software, and that's a license. You don't own the software. The license is not transferable. And that's partly so that, you know, the secondhand market doesn't completely kill us. So they can just get a new copy of the companion guide, and it's less expensive than buying a copy of the whole book. So it's not like they're completely losing out here. The other possibility, if the limit has been reached, is that they've tried to download it like 8 times, and either the download failed because like they maybe had a firewall that didn't allow downloads, in which case they need to adjust their security settings, or if they had like an over-aggressive antivirus software that doesn't trust PDF files or something like that. Most of the time, the file did actually download and it's sitting in their downloads folder, and they just don't know how to find that. So if you can help them navigate to their downloads folder, you should see the file there. Now, once they've downloaded it, a lot of our files that have more than one PDF, so if it's got, you know, like the super supplemental collection, they're zipped, they're .zip files. On a Mac, if you double click a zip file, it will extract all the files for you. But on a PC, they don't do that automatically. Some of them do, some of them don't. They're not totally consistent. And you can go in on a PC and look at the files inside and try and open them up, but they don't work properly because they're stuck in a zip folder. So there's links and buttons that reference file structure that doesn't work inside of a zip file. So you need to tell them, you know, right click on this zip file and click extract or unarchive or unzip or whatever the terminology may be. And then it'll make a new folder with all their files inside, and it should work just fine. So if you get people saying, hey, my buttons can't be clicked, that's likely what's happened if they're actually using Adobe Reader. And then next, people want to know about file compatibility. So all of our software is, I mean, most of it, 99% of it is just PDF files, and they're compatible with a broad swath of devices. If it's a single PDF file, like a companion guide, it'll work on almost anything because almost anything can read a PDF file. If it's a complicated PDF file or a series of PDF files, like with Wonder Maps or the folder book collection or the note-taking pages, that will work on your PC or on your Mac, on a desktop or a laptop. We do not warrant that those kinds of things are going to work on a mobile device because file structures just don't work the same on your phone or your tablet. Chromebooks are another thing that we see people asking about a lot. Chromebooks are not actually laptops. They're a glorified web browser. They're lovely, but you can't do everything on them that you could do on a real desktop or a real laptop. So Chromebooks often don't work with our materials. Linux, we get questions on Linux. Some of them work, some of them don't. If you're able to install Adobe Reader, they'll probably work fine. But basically, we always recommend people use a desktop or a laptop. Anything beyond that, it's a gamble. With our audiobooks, those are all in MP3 files. So if you know how to put MP3 files onto your phone or your car or whatever, great. If you don't know how to do that, then this might not be the best product for you, or you can help walk them through that if you're super patient and know what you're doing. And our ebooks, if you get an ebook from us, it'll either be in a Kindle file format or a .epub. Kindle file formats only work on Kindle devices. EPUBs work on Kindles and any other device that can read ebooks. So a Nook, almost all computers have some kind of a e-reader software. Adobe has an e-reader software that you can download. EPUBs are pretty universal, but you have to know how to actually open them or get them onto your device. So those are our general file compatibility questions. And then the last set of questions, we don't get this very often, but some people, most people who are doing a co-op or a classroom know that if I buy this copy of this book, I only have a license to use it with a single family. But some people aren't sure what the rules are there, so they'll ask. If people want to use any of our works with a co-op or a classroom, we're delighted for that to happen, and we have a special pricing setup that we'll do for co-ops and classrooms. So if you get people who want to use it for people outside of their family, send them to us, because we like to take care of co-ops and schools ourselves. We offer good pricing. We offer bulk discounts if each of their families needs a copy of the reader and that sort of thing. So co-ops and classrooms, just send them to BIP. All right, so it has been a whirlwind 85 minutes. We've got some time now for Q&A. Like I said, I will be sending you all of these Excel sheets and this PowerPoint deck so that you have them as handy reference for whenever you need them. But if you've got questions right now, you can submit them in chat, or you can use the Q&A panel that Zoom has. But I am available, not just right now during the webinar, but as you guys have questions or comments or feedback on the programs at any time, feel free to send them to me. You can give me a call, you can shoot me an email. I'm not on Facebook super much, so that's not a great way to get a hold of me. But we love to hear from you guys, and we're always happy to help you. If you've got weird customer questions that are just head scratchers, we would be delighted to share them, or to share the answers with you. My email is tyler@brightideaspress.com, and yeah, feel free to ask me anything. Susan, do we have any questions in the chat that I missed?
The only thing that I think we have remaining is the last one from Deanne about having a universal code that would just be internal. So I definitely hear what you're saying about that, that then you guys would have one that you could use internally whenever you wanted to download something. My suggestion would be to use a code and download the files and keep them in a Dropbox folder or some sort of a shared folder where you don't have to take the time to download the product again every time you need to reference it, that you would go ahead and use one of your codes and download it and save it in a shared box. But yes, we could get you a code. It would be a code for each product that would have, let me think through that we could have our IT guy assign unlimited use. Those codes, just in case they got tapped anywhere, we try, even internally with our team, we try to only use codes to access those files that have limited download uses. I think the best option is probably to save those in some sort of shared drive, but we can keep working to navigate that piece.
All right. Well, thank you guys for taking time to be here with us today. I hope this has been helpful, and we'll try and do these more often in the future when we have new products that are out or updates to existing products. Hopefully they won't all take 90 minutes to go through every time we have something new, but I want to make sure you guys have the best and most useful information. And like I said, if you have any questions anytime, shoot me an email, give me a call. More than happy to help out. And thank you guys so much for being here today.